Okay, I think we're live. Let's see, restream. Help us out. Okay, cool, I see myself. As always, I can see your messages. And we got a couple APIP New Mexico comrades in the messages. So if you cannot hear me, please let a girl know and we will resolve the issue. Oh my god. I'm trying to log into the chat. You know that CAPTCHA that's like, click all the images that contain this word? So like it was asking me for crosswalks. And I hate them because I can never tell which image counts. Greetings, good morning. We have our first viewer. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Today I have a work meeting immediately after the show, so I'm gonna work really hard to keep it to 60 minutes. Otherwise, all hell is gonna break loose. So we're gonna give folks a few minutes to join us, to trickle in. Good morning, or good afternoon, good day, wherever you are. I'm Onya Sanwu. This is our show. And we do this every single Thursday. Every single Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico presents this show where we talk to y'all about current events, about political education from a revolutionary Pan-African perspective, Pan-African socialist perspective. So every single Thursday we're going to be here. We have a really great show for y'all. It's going to be hopefully a very tightly timed show so that I do not get in trouble at work. And yeah, just give people a few more minutes to join us. How's everyone doing also? How are y'all? I'm doing okay. It's like the week before. Hey Kafid, thanks for joining us. Good to see you. Yeah, this is the week before African Liberation Day. It's coming Monday the 25th, and we're going to talk about what African Liberation Day is on the show. But it's something we do every year. It's like one of our biggest events of the year. And it is always like a really intense and really busy time because you're trying to coordinate people all over the world. You're trying to coordinate people all over the world, speaking all different languages, all different time zones, to make this event. Man, it's stressful, but the outcome is always worth it. So this week has been a little bit intense for yours truly, and for many APIP people around the world. But we are working very, very hard to give y'all an incredible African Liberation Day, a virtual African Liberation Day for the first time ever next Monday. And I think it's going to be worth it. I think it's going to be a good time. I hope you can tune in. We're going to give you all the details on the show today. It's 11:04. I see more and more people. Hi, everybody. I see folks sharing the video. I deeply appreciate that. We definitely want to get as many people watching this as possible, because I am a big believer, especially as like a revolutionary African, in making our own lane, because people are not ever gonna represent our perspective or like put us on their platforms. Because like as a revolutionary Pan-African socialist, as an African woman, as like a queer African woman, like a lot of people get mad when I talk. A lot of people get mad when folks in the APIP talk because they can't handle it. They cannot handle a revolutionary African perspective. And so with platforms like this, and also Hood Communist, and also all the blogs that organizations have, we're making our own lane. We're making our own like media platform so that we can put our perspective out there without anyone trying to control it or censor it or tell us to like chill. No. We make our own lane so we can say what we need to say regardless of how people feel about it. And this show is an example of that. So we deeply appreciate your support. And we think that if you're like a revolutionary African person watching this, if you're in a revolutionary colonized people's organization, that you should do it too. You should absolutely do it. We have to make our own lane because these people are not going to let us say what we need to say. They're going to try to silence us. They're going to try to marginalize us. They're going to try to like attack us for telling the truth. But if we're doing it on our own platforms that we control, they can't do anything but get mad. That's why we do it. Alrighty, it's 11:05. In the interest of making sure that this is wrapped up by the time I have to go to work, we're going to get started. So greetings. My name is Onya Sanu. I am an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the New Mexico chapter. And this is our weekly show, Weekly Pan-African News Live. That's the name for now. I kind of like it. It reminds me of Saturday Night Live. We might change it, but that's what it is now. And what is the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter? Well, it is one chapter based on occupied Tiwa territory here in New Mexico of a revolutionary Pan-African socialist mass political party that is based in Africa with chapters all over the African continent and all over the African world. So our most dynamic and largest chapters are in Africa, are in places like Ghana and Guinea-Bissau and Senegal and Zambia, which is the, African people's name for so-called South Africa. But we also have chapters, obviously, in the United States, on occupied Tiwa territory, in California, in Illinois, in Maryland, in New York. We also have chapters in Canada. If I have anything to say about it, we're going to have chapters in Central and South America, because that's where my family's from. And we are, once again, a revolutionary Pan-African socialist mass party with the political objective of Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, because we believe that when Africa is free, African people everywhere will be free. When our land is free, when the vast riches of Africa, when the vast mineral wealth of Africa is controlled collectively and democratically by the masses of African people all over the world under a socialist system, then we can use those resources and we can use that wealth and we can use that land to provide for the basic needs of our people, to make sure that no matter where we exist in the world, our people can have healthcare, our people can have housing, our people can have safety, our people can have joy, because instead of having our resources exploited and stolen by colonizers, by capitalists, by imperialists, our resources will be used to establish a just living condition for our people. So that's why we're Pan-Africanists. That's why we're fighting to liberate Africa, even though we're here in occupied Tiwa territory. That's why we call ourselves African, because that's our home. It'll always be our home. And this is Weekly Pan-African News Live, happening on occupied Tiwa territory. At the beginning of every show, we always want to call in an ancestor. African revolutionary work happening in 2020 is part of a continuum over 5 centuries long of constant struggle for liberation on the part of African people. From the very first moment that European colonizers, European invaders set foot on our land, African people have been fighting back. You might have learned in school that, African people just submitted when colonizers came and enslaved us. That is not the case. That has never been the case. We have been fighting back continuously from the very beginning. And so we, as revolutionary Pan-Africanists, recognize our work in this time as part of a continuum of struggle. We are fulfilling a legacy that is centuries old, and so that's why we acknowledge our ancestors, because without them, we would not even be here. We would not be doing this work if they had not fought and struggled for us to get where we are today. So we owe it to them, we owe it to our children, we owe it to ourselves to acknowledge them in this work. And so the ancestor we're calling in today is El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X. His birthday was this past 19th, which I believe was Tuesday. And he was a revolutionary Pan-Africanist. You might not know that because the common image of Malcolm X within the U.S., within the West, is basically just a caricature of who he actually was. People focus on the Spike Lee representation, where it was all about, intense race nationalism until he went to Mecca, and then he was like, I love Europeans. And that's the arc that he's represented with. But it's such a small portion of who he actually was, and also distortion of that small portion. Because in reality, Malcolm X traveled all over the African world. He traveled to Africa and talked to revolutionary African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré. He traveled all over the U.S., building organizations wherever he went. The last organization he founded before he was assassinated by the U.S. government, colluding with the New York police and counter-revolutionary elements within African organizations, was the Organization of Afro-American Unity, which had the objective of uniting all people of African descent in the Western Hemisphere within one organization. And that is an explicitly Pan-African political objective. That's an explicitly Pan-African political objective. Because after Malcolm X went to Africa, after he met Kwame Nkrumah, after he experienced the Organization of African Unity, which the Organization of Afro-American Unity was based on, Malcolm X was like, we need to connect the struggles of African people in the Western Hemisphere to the struggles of African people on the continent, because the only way we win is together. So he was a Pan-Africanist. If you read his last speeches, there's a book called The Final Speeches of Malcolm X. It's extremely clear. And so I would say that he is drastically misunderstood because of the way that Western media and Western culture chooses to portray him. And we as African people have a responsibility to surface the truth of what he believed and who he was beyond that caricature. So the show today is dedicated to our revolutionary Pan-African ancestor, Malcolm X. Thank you so much. So, this week's topic, PE topic, is African Liberation Day. African Liberation Day is this coming Monday, the 25th. We don't recognize Memorial Day. I don't even know the history of that holiday. I don't actually care. All I care about is African Liberation Day. African Liberation Day is celebrated every single year all over the African world and has been celebrated since 1958. What is the history of African Liberation Day? Why is this such an important holiday to our movement? I'll let you know. So African Liberation Day was founded in 1958 when Kwame Nkrumah convened the first conference of independent states held in Accra, Ghana. That conference was attended by 8 independent African states that had successfully waged struggles against colonialism and won and instituted their own independent governments. The leaders of those states came together in this conference, and they declared the 15th of April Africa Freedom Day. And the intent of that day was to mark each year the progress of the movement for African liberation, and also to symbolize the determination of African people to free ourselves from foreign domination under colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. So between 1958 and the early 1960s, there was intensification of the national liberation struggle and class struggle in Africa and throughout the colonized world. In that period, that 5-year period between 1958 and 1963, 17 countries in Africa won their independence from European colonialism. And it was so intense, and it made people around the world so proud, that 1960 was declared the Year of Africa. Throughout that period, in the late 1950s and the early 1960s, there were many advances made to defeat European and U.S. imperialism in Africa and Asia and the Caribbean. Imperialism was on the ropes. People were fighting back all over the world and winning. So on May 25th, 1963, another conference was convened by the Organization of African Unity that had 31 African heads of state leading independent African nations that had liberated themselves from European and Western colonialism. And they declared that May 25th would from then on be African Freedom Day or African Liberation Day. The intent of this holiday is to celebrate the liberation of African people, the liberation we won ourselves, and also to mark where we are in the struggle and also convene to discuss how much farther we need to go and how we get there. So it's celebrated throughout the African world as a place to mark our progress, to reflect on where we came from, and also to reflect on where we need to go to finish this struggle. So all over the African world, in every African organization, not just the APRP, but any revolutionary Pan-African organization, any organization that's fighting for African liberation with a focus on Africa, commemorates African Liberation Day all over the world. And that's May 25th every single year. So since, African Liberation Day was founded, and since that period of intense struggle for national liberation in Africa, there have been, a lot of setbacks because U.S. imperialism, Western imperialism has never stopped attacking our people. So we saw the assassination and the overthrow of many of our revolutionary African leaders. We saw the U.S. move to crush liberation movements all over the world. We saw the U.S. move to establish a dominant military presence in Africa under the so-called AFRICOM program. So we're living in a period where the anti-colonial struggle, the anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist struggle has kind of seen a lot of setbacks. And so it is particularly important in this period of time when imperialism is, reeling from this global pandemic, reeling from, the collapse of its infrastructure because it's not equipped to deal with crises, for African people to come together to talk about a strategy to move forward. And so that is the intent of African Liberation Day. To celebrate our history, to talk about where we are right now, to assess it collectively and scientifically, and then to talk about where we need to move from here. So, as the history, it's a holiday that maybe you've never heard of, particularly if you're outside of the Pan-African movement, but it's a holiday that's really core to the struggle for African liberation. It's something that we created, an institution that we created and that we maintain, and that African people are taking the lead in celebrating around the world. You're never going to see an ALD stamp. You're never going to see the U.S. declare ALD a national holiday. You're never going to see the U.S. president having a ceremony at the White House talking about African Liberation Day, because African Liberation Day, from its inception, was about destroying colonialism, destroying imperialism, and destroying capitalism. It's about destroying foreign domination, and so these people cannot co-opt this holiday. It is ours. It's ours. And so we have a responsibility to celebrate it. And this year, 2020, you have the opportunity watching this to join African Liberation Day from the comfort of your own home. Why is that? Because of COVID-19, this global pandemic that is taking out many of our people, that is drastically impacting African, indigenous, and colonized people, particularly the United States, we cannot safely convene a mass gathering. We're not going to ask people to show up and gather in a space and spread the infection. And so in the interest of safety, and also in the interest of reaching the widest audience possible in these times, the APRP is organizing our first ever virtual African Liberation Day, which means that you can watch African Liberation Day live this coming Monday, May 25th, from the APRP International Facebook page, which is facebook.com/APRP, and APRP International YouTube page. So every single year, ALD has a specific theme when the APRP organizes it, where we try to identify a key issue that's affecting the African world and affecting the anti-imperialist struggle. And this year, the theme of African Liberation Day is calling for African people all over the world to demand an end to U.S. sanctions on Zimbabwe, on Cuba, and Venezuela. The full theme is imperialist sanctions on Zimbabwe, Cuba, and Venezuela are acts of war. Africans everywhere must fight. So, do you know what sanctions are? If you don't, it's cool, because imperialism works really, really hard to make sure that people don't understand what it's doing. It uses friendly sounding words to obscure the violence of its tactics, and sanctions are a really, really good example of that. So what are sanctions? Sanctions are basically a form of economic warfare. They are a way for the US and Europe and the UN to control or attempt to control how a colonized country moves by strangling its economy, by controlling whether or not it can sell its main export on the global market, by controlling who it's able to do business with, and by restricting drastically the goods that it can import within a given country. So in the theme, we name Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and Cuba, and those are really, really good examples of how sanctions work and why sanctions are targeted at particular countries. For example, in the case of Zimbabwe, why is Zimbabwe sanctioned by the United States? Well, Zimbabwe was a British settler colony until ZANU-PF and the masses of African people in Zimbabwe said, we've had quite enough of this, we're going to take our land back. And they waged a struggle for national liberation where they overthrew the system of British settler colonialism and regained control of their land. And as punishment for this, as punishment for the African people in Zimbabwe saying, we are going to take our shit back, thanks, Britain leaned on the US to impose a system of economic sanctions on Zimbabwe. And the impact of those sanctions made it so Zimbabwe could not generate the income it needed to provide for the basic needs of its citizens. And again, this was punishment for Africans taking their land back from the British. The British had no right whatsoever to go into Zimbabwe and steal African people's land. But the British were so pissed that African people were able to take it back that they went to the United States and they were like, punish this country. And so now there's this whole narrative about how Zimbabwe is starving its people, about how Zimbabwe's government hates Europeans, about how Zimbabwe is corrupt, blah, blah, blah. And everybody ignores the impact of the sanctions. Sanctions are always sold as like, oh, we're just targeting, the bad actors. We're just targeting the people in power who are not doing what we want them to do. But the reality of sanctions is that if you restrict a country's economy, if you restrict how they can buy and sell and trade on the global market, if you say you cannot import medicine and you cannot import food and no one's going to buy your exports, you know what that does? That drastically affects the masses of civilians in that targeted country. It's not the leadership of Zimbabwe that's being punished. It's like the regular masses, like women, children, nanas, aunties, regular ass people that are affected. When a country can't import medicine, when a country can't import, building materials to maintain its infrastructure, when a country cannot sell its main export products, a country cannot maintain the basic needs of its own citizens. It can't provide healthcare. It can't provide quality housing. It can't provide, food at a reasonable price. And so people suffer and starve. And that is what sanctions do on the ground. They don't target the leadership, even though the leadership should not be targeted just because they took the land back. Sanctions deliberately target civilians. They target the masses of people. And Zimbabwe is not the only case. Cuba is named in the theme because Cuba has been blockaded by the United States for over 50 years. The U.S. blockade on Cuba, which was imposed because Cuba overthrew U.S. imperialism and instituted a socialist government, and the United States was like, we can't have that. We need to attack this country until they get rid of socialism. So the U.S. blockade on Cuba has cost the Cuban economy trillions of dollars over the course of 50 years. When you hear about people like lining up to buy food in Cuba and how Cuba's like so poor and how Cuba's like this and that, like people always blame Castro or they blame socialism, but they never look at the U.S. blockade. And it says like in the law when the blockade was first imposed that the intent was to make the Cuban people suffer so much that they would overthrow Fidel Castro and overthrow the socialist government. Clearly it's been 50 years and that has not happened, so that's not ever going to work. But the blockade is still in place and it is still causing the mass of people in Cuba to suffer for the so-called crime of liberating themselves from colonialism and imperialism. So sanctions are applied on a country that is colonized when it does not do what U.S. and Europe and the UN want. They use sanctions as a means of trying to impose mass suffering to get the people in these countries to do what they want, to get these people in these countries to overthrow the governments they built. It never works. It almost never works. Like I think it only works like 30% of the time, according to the Center for Economic Justice. But the U.S. does it anyway, and in doing so, it kills millions of people around the world in mostly colonized nations full of people who are not white. So that's Zimbabwe, that's Cuba, and then the other country named in the theme is Venezuela. If you are a person who follows the news, if you are a person that consumes a steady diet of U.S. mainstream media, then you probably heard a lot of straight up bullshit about Venezuela, about its dictatorship, about how they're starving their own people. That's a recurring theme. The U.S. sanctions a country, makes it so a government cannot feed their people, and then says, oh my god, that government's starving their own people, without acknowledging the sanctions. So that's what happened to Zimbabwe, that's what happened to Cuba, and the exact same thing is happening to Venezuela. The United States has stolen millions of dollars from the Venezuelan government that was going to be used to provide for the needs of Venezuelan people. The United States government has manipulated the price of oil in the global market to make it so Venezuela cannot make money from its oil reserves. The United States has prevented Venezuela from selling its oil all over the world, except through proxies. And so in this way, the United States is using its domination over the global economy to control Venezuela's economy. Because Venezuela chose the socialist path, Venezuela is in the so-called backyard of the United States in the Western Hemisphere, and so the United States feels it should have a say in how Venezuela's state is organized, which to me makes no sense. It would be like if I was to my neighbor, I don't like how you live, so I'm going to slash your tires every day until you do what I want. It makes no motherfucking sense. It makes no sense that the United States feels like it could have a say in how a completely independent country organizes its government, but that's how imperialism moves. That's how the U.S. has always moved. That's how the U.S. treats African indigenous people within its borders. So it's not particularly surprising that they feel they should have a say in the way that Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Cuba run their own shit. But as African revolutionaries, as anti-imperialists and anti-colonial revolutionaries, we have a responsibility to look beyond the U.S. narrative, to understand how sanctions work, and to fight, particularly within the United States, for their end. And so that is what African Liberation Day 2020 is about. We want to draw attention to the barbarism of sanctions. We want to draw attention to how the U.S. acts as a bully, how Europe acts as a bully, how the UN acts as a bully on the global stage against African and colonized countries. And we want to say we are absolutely not going to stand for this. We are going to organize to destroy this. You are not going to sanction countries for ending colonialism. Colonialism should never have been imposed in the first place, and it is just incorrect for Zimbabwe to take back their land and give it to African people and chase Europeans out. It is just incorrect for Cuba to overthrow U.S. imperialism and build a socialist state, and it is just incorrect for Venezuela to do the same thing. And the U.S. has no right whatsoever to attempt to control those countries. So that's what ALD 2020 is about. And the ALD 2020 celebration is going to feature many, many speakers from all around the world, from Cuba, from Zimbabwe, from Venezuela, from Guinea-Bissau, from Senegal, from Ghana, from Tanzania, speaking on this topic from their perspective. We have many, you're going to see how international organization the All African People's Revolutionary Party is when you tune into ALD this Monday, because we have connections all over the world. We are connected to struggles for justice all over the world, and those folks show up for us on ALD. And so those folks are going to be speaking from their perspective on the barbarism and injustice of sanctions and why sanctions need to end. If you have no idea what sanctions are, even after I talked about them, then tune in to ALD this Monday and learn how disgusting they are and how many African countries are directly affected. Africa is actually the most sanctioned landmass on the face of the planet, which should not surprise you because U.S. imperialism, U.S. capitalism is racist as hell. So, ALD 2020 is going to have a lot of speakers from all over the world. It's going to have really dynamic edutainment. Edutainment is like, what's the word? Is it a portmanteau where you like put two words together? So it's education and entertainment smashed together, edutainment. And so we're going to have revolutionary African entertainers and cultural workers presenting their work, performing for y'all. We're going to have a really great panel of international speakers speaking out on the impact of sanctions. We're going to have a really great panel of revolutionary African women from the continent speaking on the impact of sanctions on women and children. We're going to have legacy awards for militants in the APRP who have been in the struggle for decades. Like, the APRP has been around for like 51 years doing work. And we very rarely get credit because, like I said at the top of the show, revolutionary African politics are marginalized in the mainstream. We have to make our own lane. And so at this ALD celebration, we want to uplift the work of African revolutionaries within the APRP who have been on the ground doing the work for decades. And it's just going to be a really, really great show. And it's free. So, in a second, I'm going to cover my face so y'all can get the info about how to tune into African Liberation Day, but you should still be able to hear me. So 1 second. Boop. So, ALD 2020 is going down this coming Monday, May 25th. We're going to have revolutionary speakers from Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Tanzania, Cuba, Venezuela, Senegal, and more. We're going to have revolutionary African entertainment. We're going to have libations and a prayer to open the ceremony. We're going to celebrate the revolutionaries and militants within the APRP who have been putting in the work for our people for decades. And that's going down Monday, May 25th, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 10:30 a.m. Central Time, 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time. That's for you if you're watching this from New Mexico, and 8:30 a.m. Pacific Time. If you're not in the United States, please do the conversion to find your time zone. It's 3:30 p.m. UTC. But I don't know what that stands for. Also, someone's calling me. Stop. Okay, cool. And then also, you can watch the broadcast for free live from the APRP International Facebook page and APRP International YouTube page. The links are on this graphic. It is facebook.com/APRP for the Facebook page and then youtube.com/user/APRP International for the YouTube account or the YouTube channel. So please take note of those URLs, take note of that date and that time, and please join us for ALD 2020. We are going to be educating y'all about sanctions. We are going to be celebrating all the incredible work our people have done collectively to fight for African liberation, and we're going to talk about where we need to go. It's going to be a great event representing the dynamism of the struggle for African liberation. You do not want to miss it. Also, I'm going to MC the whole thing. We're going to see how that goes. So please tune in Monday, May 25th, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 10:30 a.m. Central Time, 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time, and 8:30 a.m. Pacific on the APRP International Facebook page and the APRP International YouTube channel. Which means those two sources mean that if you are a person who is rightfully anti-Facebook, we should all, honestly, like, Facebook is so evil. It spies on people. So if you don't have a Facebook account because you are smart, then you can watch us on YouTube without having to log into a damn thing. So please tune in this Monday. If you follow me on Facebook, or you follow the APRP on Facebook, or you follow APRP New Mexico on Facebook, we are going to keep putting this flyer up over and over and over again so that y'all can join us. And we hope to see you there. I'm going to take this down. Boop. Hi. Alrighty. Once again, we thank y'all for your comments. We thank y'all for your interactions. We love y'all so much for joining us. Hello, Samuel. Hello, Kafid. Hello, Comrade Monica from Midpure, New Mexico. We really appreciate you for joining us. Hello, Rye. I like your name. Anywho, so that was the political education segment. I think that took 20 minutes. So far we're doing good. And now I have 30 minutes for the entire rest of the show. Can I do it? I think I could do it. All right, so COVID-19 updates. What's going on with this pandemic from an African perspective? So, in the United States, we are living through a period where there is like a lot of discussion at the national level and also at the state level about reopening the economy, about so-called like soft reopens, about gradually opening things back up for business. For example, here in New Mexico, the governor recently announced that on June 1st, they're going to open restaurants, gyms, and malls at limited capacity. I just want to say unequivocally, that is a mistake. That is going to kill thousands of people, and the majority of those people are going to be African, indigenous, and colonized people. Why is that going to happen? Because the United States is the epicenter of the global pandemic. It has the fastest growing number of infections and the most infections of any other country in the world, and there is no mass testing. Most people in the United States have either no health insurance or really terrible health insurance that's tied to their jobs. There's a bunch of Europeans with no social skills or sense of responsibility to the rest of humanity out in the streets wilding out. And here in New Mexico, we are number 2 in the entire country for the number of children who are infected and being impacted by this virus. And on top of all of those things, on top of no mass testing, on top of no health infrastructure, on top of the Europeans flipping out and being extremely violent when they're asked to do basic things to like take care of other people, we are not at the peak in the United States. We're not at the peak of infections. There is nothing happening right now that indicates that it's a good idea to reopen the economy. Instead, the people in leadership, the people that folks have elected to represent them, are acting based on a fear that wealthy people are going to lose some of their wealth. When they say that we don't want the economy to tank, or they say we want to save the economy, they're not talking about you. They're not talking about your job. They're not talking about how you're going to feed your family. They're talking about Jeff Bezos. They're talking about Elon Musk. They're talking about Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, all those rich-ass bourgeois who, when you do not allow them to exploit your labor because you're not working, lose money. When they say we need to save the economy, they're talking about rich people's wealth. They're not talking about you. They're talking about billion-dollar corporations, trillion-dollar corporations that are exploiting you. So essentially what these soft reopens are doing is they're using working-class colonized people as guinea pigs, as acceptable losses. They're saying we're going to see how dangerous it is by sending your ass into the fucking breach by saying, let's see how many of these brown people die, how many of these poor people die, how many can we sacrifice to make sure that Jeff Bezos does not lose $1 off of his net worth. So reopening the economy is not about you. It is not about concern for you. It is not about concern for your life. It's about concern for the rich or wealthy people, or concern for the wealth of rich people. So they are using us as like test subjects. They're using us as like beta trials. They're using us as guinea pigs, as a control group, so that they can send us out into danger and maintain the wealth of these rich-ass corporations and these rich-ass sociopaths. So these soft reopens are happening too soon. They're happening too soon. And they are sacrificing us to save rich people. Absolutely not. I refuse. And you should refuse too. And the other thing, like on top of the fact that we're not at the peak, on top of the fact that there is no mass testing, so no one has any idea how many people are actually infecting the United States, on top of the fact that most people in the United States do not have access to good medical care, so if they get sick, they're fucked. On top of all of that, the U.S. government is actively downplaying the scope of the problem. Florida, for example, just fired the woman who built their COVID-19 dashboard because she refused to manipulate the number of infections downward. She said, I am not going to play with this data to make it look better, and they fired her. They are deliberately hiding the number of people who are infected. So we don't even understand the scope of the problem in the United States. And they're telling us it's time to reopen the economy when we don't even know how many people have this infection. We don't even know how many people are sick. And when those people get sick, many of them just fucking die because healthcare in this country is extremely expensive and also racist. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. These soft reopens are just expressions of like rich people's anxiety about being less rich. Period. It's not about us. It's not about our lives. It's about their wealth. Period. So we are saying unequivocally that shit is happening too soon. It's happening too soon. It is not time for a soft reopen. If you can't even you don't even understand the problem, then how are you saying it's getting better? Like, what the hell? So yeah, we talk about COVID-19 on this show, and we give y'all like the perspective that you're not going to get from the mainstream news, because the mainstream news is the perspective of these rich-ass sociopaths and these rich-ass corporations that depend on exploiting our labor to survive. And so they're going to give the perspective that it's not a big deal, that things are getting better, even as thousands of mostly African, indigenous, and colonized people are dying. So it's not, no, fuck it, soft reopen. That's terrible. It's not time. It's too soon. It's going to kill thousands of people, period. So, COVID-19 update. We definitely encourage folks to like resist these soft reopens. If the governor of your state is like, yeah, it's safe to go to the gym, you better not listen, please. Like, please don't listen to those people. Please make the decision that is going to be safest for yourself and for your family and for the people around you, and that is continuing to social distance, continue to wear a mask in public, continue to avoid crowded places because it is not safe, because these people have no idea what they're doing, because these people are panicking and trying to sacrifice you to save capitalism. I'm not going to be sacrificed to save capitalism. I refuse. Let's see, we have some comments. Hello, Kafid. Thank you for explaining sanctions. Thank you for listening. And let's see what else. Why haven't they taken this health crisis seriously? Until health care is nationalizing, the government is playing. You are correct. They're not taking it seriously because they don't care if we live or die. All they care about is that we can keep working and making them money. They don't care if we have health care. They don't care if we get sick and die. They do not care. I just read a news article that said that if the United States had imposed social distancing on March 1st, instead of like a couple of weeks later, 36,000 people would not have died. The United States had like a 2-month head start. Like, we found out about COVID-19 in January, and the United States did not do anything. Even as it saw COVID-19 wrecking countries around the world, the United States did not do shit to save lives here. And then once the pandemic hit this country, it became clear to the leadership of the United States who was actually dying, which is African people, which is indigenous people, which is Chicano, Latino, Asian people. Then they were like, oh, okay, we want those people gone anyway, so let's reopen the economy. Once they realized it was us that was being dying, they had no interest whatsoever in mitigating those deaths. We are acceptable losses to the U.S. government. So they are absolutely, even though it's like the richest country on earth, because the U.S. has like looted the entire world, the U.S. only exists because it enslaved my ancestors and committed genocide against indigenous people and then used that to grow like a global empire. Clearly, a country built on that foundation is not ever going to give a fuck about colonized people, about African indigenous people. So all we are seeing is a continuation of a policy towards us on the part of the U.S. government that has existed since the inception of the U.S. They have never cared about us. They have always commodified and dependent on enslaving and exploiting us to enrich themselves. And so all they're doing is just continuing what they've always done, except the context of a pandemic means we are dying much faster. So yeah, they're not going to nationalize healthcare because it's us that's dying. They don't even fucking care. If it was like, rich-ass Europeans, if it was like a disease that only affected crackers, that only affected wealthy crackers, they would be on top of that shit. They would be on top of that. They would be like, we need to give these people universal health care. We need to make sure that these people don't have to think about their rent. We need to make sure that they are good. But since it's college people dying, since it's like African people dying, they're like, okay, let's just let that happen because we want to get those people anyway. So yeah, fuck us off, reopen. And you are correct, Kafid, because we understand that the U.S. is never, ever, 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 ever going to care about us. Europe is never going to care about us. The Western world is never going to care about us. We, as African and colonized people, as indigenous people, as Asian people, as Chicano people, have a responsibility to organize, to take care of ourselves, to protect our own communities, to win our liberation. If you are an African or colonized person watching me talking right now, and you are not in an organization, now is the time for you to get the hell off the sidelines and get in the fight. Because once again, this place is going to let us die. This place is not going to stop the flow of blood. This place wants us gone. It wants to exploit our labor and then it wants to kill us off. Which means we as African and colonized people must organize to save ourselves. Because this place is not going to do it. If you are not an organization, now is the time for you to join an organization. And in a couple of minutes, I'll talk about how you can do that. Anywho. Next segment. African world news. So what is going on in the African world around this pandemic? How are African people in the diaspora and on the continent responding? Let's get into that. So first of all, we've talked a couple of times on this show about herbal, like an indigenous African herbal remedy that Madagascar has developed from a plant called Artemisia annua. The colloquial name is sweet wormwood. And so Madagascar has developed this treatment they're calling COVID organics, made from that plant and a couple of other like indigenous African herbs that they are touting as a cure for COVID-19. And now this treatment that Madagascar has developed has been shipped to, I believe, like 15 countries throughout the continent. Let me see. So Tanzania, Equatorial Guinea, the Central African Republic, Congo, the Republic of Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and Guinea-Bissau have all received thousands of doses of Madagascar's COVID-19 organics for free. And now this treatment is being distributed like throughout West Africa. So as soon as like news of this treatment emerged, like the World Health Organization was like, whoa. Like we don't even know if this works. There's like a lot of skepticism. Either there's skepticism or people are like straight up not acknowledging it. But if you look at what's happening in Madagascar in terms of COVID-19, I believe they've had no deaths, and they have like something like 100 and something infections. So clearly something Madagascar is doing is working, and there has already been, like in China, they use traditional Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese herbs to treat people with COVID-19 with success. So it's already a precedent for using traditional medicines rather than Western medicine to treat this virus with success. And so while I have not tested COVID organics, I have not seen peer-reviewed studies about the efficacy of COVID organics, but what we do know is that traditional medicine has seen success against COVID-19, and so what Madagascar is doing, what these African countries are doing is like worth following to see how it's doing, because Africa, Madagascar, Senegal, Ghana is doing a much, much, much better job of taking care of its people during the pandemic than the so-called, freest country on earth, the United States. And so we should learn from them instead of regarding it with automatic skepticism because it's coming from, dark-skinned people instead of Europeans. So that's what Madagascar is doing. Definitely recommend folks, Google COVID organics in Madagascar and read up on it. It's really, really interesting. Definitely, there's like lots of studies, peer-reviewed scientific studies talking about using Artemisia annua for treatment for malaria with success, as both like a preventative and treatment when folks have it. There's lots of studies looking at Artemisia annua as treatment for the common cold with success. So this is an herb that has been used for many different health problems, and it works. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that this is actually a treatment that is going to work for COVID-19. We just need more evidence. We need more studies, and I'm sure that these African countries will start producing that for us to check out. So follow the COVID-19 organic story. It's pretty exciting. Also, because the World Health Organization has has regarded Madagascar's approach with skepticism, which is like based in like a very white chauvinist, like Western chauvinist analysis of science and medicine. Madagascar has called for many African countries to leave the World Health Organization, and has also left the World Health Organization itself. And, they have the right to do that. The World Health Organization has an extremely sketchy history in the African world. For example, in 2019, it was discovered that a polio vaccine that the World Health Organization was distributing in Africa, in Nigeria, and the DRC, Central African Republic, and in Angola, accidentally caused an outbreak of polio in those countries. And the reason why the World Health Organization distributed vaccine caused a polio outbreak was because they were using an inferior version of the polio vaccine that contained a live and mutated version of the polio virus. And so by vaccinating African children in these countries with this vaccine that contained the live mutated virus, they caused a new outbreak of polio. This was written about in The Guardian last year. I'll put the link in the chat. So it's just a fact that vaccines have saved many, many more African lives than they have taken, but the distrust that Africans and African nations and African leaders have toward the World Health Organization and have toward the UN and the West in general when it comes to vaccines and when it comes to medical intervention is well-founded. It's well-founded. We have every reason not to trust these entities, and so Madagascar calling for African nations to lead the World Health Organization is like a rational move. It's a rational move. Y'all caused a polio outbreak with a vaccine because you chose to use the cheaper one on our people. So no wonder we don't trust you. So that's what's up with Madagascar. Other cool things coming out of Africa in terms of COVID-19, other positive things, are that Senegal, as we discussed before, developed a $1 COVID-19 test that produces results in less than 10 minutes. They've also had an extremely successful response to the pandemic within their borders. They chose to begin planning their response in January. Like as soon as the news came out of China about that new virus, Senegal was on it. They closed their borders. They instituted a comprehensive plan of contact tracing. They made sure that every single infected person in the nation could have a bed of their own and be in isolation, because they understood that within African cultures we usually live in multi-generational households who are really close together, and so Senegal was we gotta make sure when people get sick they could be isolated. So they were on top of it. And so as a result, Senegal's population is 16 million people, but they've only had 30 deaths from COVID-19. The United States is about to hit 100,000 deaths. Senegal has had 30 deaths in a population of 16 million people, and the reason for that is because Senegal took this seriously from the very beginning, from January, and took steps to make sure its people were good. Same situation in Ghana. Ghana has a population of 30 million and has something around 30 deaths as well, and it's because they did the exact same thing Senegal did. As soon as the news came out of China about what was happening, Ghana jumped on it in January to make sure that its people were taken care of. So despite the fact that Africa gets no credit for its own scientific and medical developments, Africa has, as a collective, as a continent, done much, much, much better at managing the response to COVID-19 than the so-called Western countries, than any country in Europe, and certainly better than the United States. And once again, Africa gets no credit because Africa never gets to tell our own story in these mainstream platforms. We are always marginalized. We are always regarded in racialized and colonial ways. And so this is why we do this show, so we can uplift these stories, so we can show that everything Africa needs to liberate Africa already exists in Africa and African people. So that's what's up with the African world and COVID-19. And we do this segment on every show. We try to highlight what the mainstream news is not going to talk about because the mainstream news is racist. That's what's up. Anywho. But, so, let's localize it a little bit and talk about specifically what's happening here in occupied Tiwa territory, here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. You might notice there's a special addition to our overlay today. It's an email address, which I'll explain. So, the governor of New Mexico recently announced that Albuquerque Public Schools, not the governor, APS, Albuquerque Public Schools, recently announced that they are planning to open back up in August 2020. As I just broke down for y'all, that makes no sense. Once again, there is no mass testing happening. Most people in New Mexico and the broader United States have no health insurance or really terrible health insurance. New Mexico is currently number 2 in the entire nation for for children being infected by COVID-19, and on top of that, we are not at the peak of infections. So this idea that kids are gonna be expected to go back to school in 2 months is a joke. It's based on basically panicking over rich people losing their wealth, over businesses closing, and it's not based on a serious scientific analysis of what's actually happening. Because unless we understand the scope of the infections, unless there's medical infrastructure in place to make sure when people get sick, to make sure when kids get sick, that they can be taken care of and they won't die, it makes no sense to send children out into the pandemic just because of anxiety from rich people and businesses. It makes no sense whatsoever. And so, if you are watching this and you agree, if you are watching this and you don't want your kid to be a guinea pig for a way too soon pilot project to repair the economy, then we encourage you to reach out to the Albuquerque Public Schools superintendent. His name is Scott Elder, and what we have on this overlay right here is his email address. It's elder_s@aps.edu. So if you think August is too soon to send your kids back to school, if you think that the New Mexico government should have a much better handle on the situation before they sacrifice children, then we encourage you to reach out to the APS superintendent of schools and let him know. Because right now what's happening is that business owners, capitalists, rich people are driving the conversation because they are in the ears of these leaders, of these officials, and they're saying we need to make our money, we need to open this up, we need blah blah blah. So they need the voices of regular parents, of regular working class people, of African and indigenous parents, to let them know that we do not want our children sacrificed or tested on. We want to know for sure that it is safe, that they will not get sick, and that they will not get sick and bring that shit back to their families before you bring them back to school. So let him know. Email the superintendent of APS and let him know that we need mass testing, we need universal health care, we need free childcare, we need infrastructure in place to take care of people before we sacrifice our children to see if it's safe or not. Our children are not guinea pigs. Our children are not, test subjects for your ill-conceived plan to save rich people's wealth. Let him know. elder_s@apes.edu. So, yeah, too soon to open up gyms, definitely too soon to send kids back to school. Also, important note, New Mexico Community College has already declared that they're going to do only online classes for fall. I believe UNM has said the same thing. So why is it that, colleges that have adult students are deciding it's too dangerous to have in-person classes, but schools, K-12 schools with children are saying that it's worth testing this shit on them? It makes no sense whatsoever. So please email that man and let him know we need more of a plan in place. We need to make sure that we even understand the scope of the infections before we send kids back to school. It makes no sense. Please email the superintendent. It's right there. And we'll also post this on our Facebook page. What else? Oh yeah. So, in New Mexico, we've had this so-called eviction moratorium that was declared by the governor in March, which allegedly was supposed to stop the processing of evictions in the state of New Mexico for the duration of the pandemic or until the governor takes it back. But the reality of the situation is that people are still being evicted. Like, I know someone personally, multiple people personally, who are going through the eviction process right now. So this eviction moratorium from the beginning was like an inadequate solution to the problem, because even if you say people can get evicted ostensibly, if you're still charging people rent during that period, all you're doing is making it so when the eviction moratorium is up, they're going to owe thousands of dollars that they have to pay right away, or they're going to be evicted anyway. But in reality, the eviction moratorium didn't even work for stopping evictions. People are still being actively evicted. And you can confirm that for yourself by going to the state of New Mexico court docket and looking at all the writ of restitutions that are still happening. They're still being filed. People are still being evicted. So the eviction moratorium is like not enough. And also, it's not actually stopping people from being evicted. So next week on the show, we are going to talk about eviction defense and rent moratoriums, ways that regular people can organize to defend themselves from the irresponsibility and inadequacy of the government response. So definitely tune in next week. But for now, what I'm going to say is that this eviction moratorium is no moratorium at all. People are still being evicted during a pandemic. So please, we do not need an eviction moratorium that's not even a real moratorium. We need a rent freeze, period. We have been needed a rent freeze. I know people that have not worked since March who can't even get unemployment, even though that extra is guaranteed to them, that $600 a week, because the website won't load. People who are poor as fuck, who got no stimulus check because they're married to an immigrant, or just because the government didn't feel like giving them anything. So there's people who haven't worked for like 2-3 months with no rent freeze in place, who are still being expected to pay rent even though they have no income coming in, and who are still being put into eviction processes. Because the government response from the very beginning has been half-assed. It's been half-assed. So yeah, eviction moratorium, not a real thing. Has never been a real thing. People are still getting evicted. We need a rent freeze, period. If people cannot work, they can't pay rent. It's like so basic. If you have no income coming in, how can you possibly pay $1,000 bill every month? Like, my God. It's like so basic, but the people in charge are like so out of touch with what's actually happening to like the masses of working class people, the masses of colonized people. They're just doing like useless shit and being like, you're welcome. And you gotta call it out. We gotta join organizations and fight back, because they are not gonna do the right thing by us. So that's New Mexico updates. We're doing pretty good for time, even though I wanted to be out here in an hour, and it's been an hour. We only have a couple of sections left. Yeah. So, local organizing updates. This is the part of the show where I tell you how you can get involved in the movement. If you are an African person watching me talk right now, we need you in the APRP. We need you in the African People's Revolutionary Party, helping us build a movement for Pan-Africanism, helping us organize community defense in African communities all over the world and all over the continent. Here in New Mexico, we have been delivering food and supplies to 40 African families and 9 African elders for the past 3 weeks. We're doing this every single week. We are dropping off supplies because, like I said, this government from the very beginning has half-assed the response, has been sacrificing people, sacrificing their lives, and not taking care of the basic needs of folks who are being left out to dry. And so in this gap, African organizations, socialist organizations, anarchist organizations are stepping in to fulfill this need that the government's not meeting. Like, we have no resources, we have no money, we don't have the power of the government yet, but we are doing work the government is refusing to do. And we are doing this with a straight up skeleton crew. Like, the APRP New Mexico chapter is like 7 people, and we are still feeding almost 50 people every single week. And we want to do even more. We're going to keep ramping it up as we continue to do the program for the duration of the pandemic. In order to pull that off, we need you. We need you in the APRP, or we need you in an organization that's fighting for justice for African and colonized people. Now is the time. Like I said, this government has always had it out for us. This government has never had our best interest at heart. This empire has always had a directly hostile relationship to African and colonized people. And so within a crisis situation, if we expect this government to come and save us, we are confused. They are not going to do it. They're going to let us die. And if we don't want to die, then we have to organize to save ourselves. That's it. It's period. So now is the time to get off the sidelines. Now is the time to join an organization. So hold on. I'm going to put it up there for you so you know exactly how to contact us. Put up. Pow. So, like I said, we are feeding almost 50 families, 50 elders, or 50 families and elders in the community in Albuquerque here at the APRP. If you want to support that work, we need you to join the APRP as an African person or donate to support that work, because we do not have grant funding. We do not have foundation funding. We are usually paying out of pocket or paying from donations for these groceries and for these supplies. And so we are constantly taking donations. That's our memo right here at APRP-New Mexico. You can also use PayPal, donate to us. It's paypal.me/APRP-New Mexico. If you want to contribute, supplies like food, non-perishable food, hygiene supplies, masks, you can call or text us at 505-295-0008. You can also email us at aprpnewmexico@gmail.com. We've gotten so many donations from our community, which have allowed us to make really dope care packages for our community. We get weekly produce donations, like farm fresh produce from Agricultura Network every single week for free. And so huge shout out to them. We've also gotten donations of non-perishable foods from African community members who support our work. And we've also gotten lots and lots of cash donations from community members who see what we're doing and want to help. And we need that to continue because we want to serve even more people, and we want to do this for the entire pandemic and beyond. Our intent with this program is not to provide charity. Our intent is to provide or to build institutions within the African community in New Mexico that will meet the basic needs of our people when we know this government will not. We want to make sure that African people in New Mexico are good regardless of what the state does. We already know that our folks are the last to be taken care of alongside indigenous people, and so we are going to organize within our community to take care of ourselves, to save ourselves. That is the intent of the APRP's community defense work. And so if you want to contribute to that work and you're an African person, please get in touch with us. Use that number, use that email address, or message us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send us a DM and let us know. We are actively recruiting folks to join the APRP and assist with this work. And even if you don't want to join the APRP, if you're like this kind of intense, people are like mad militant, then you can still support what we're doing by donating cash money or by donating goods for us to distribute to our community. So please do that. I'm going to keep this up on the screen while I continue through the rest of the really great work that's happening in New Mexico. Once again, Millions for Prisoners New Mexico has been doing weekly Friday free them all protests to protest the fact that incarcerated detained people in the state of New Mexico are basically sitting ducks in this pandemic. It's not possible to social distance. They already had really poor access to really poor medical care. They are not being tested for the virus, and so essentially the folks that are locked up in these facilities, regardless of what their sentence was, are being assigned to death during this pandemic. And millions of prisoners in New Mexico, alongside Storing Up for Racial Justice, Albuquerque, are not standing for it. They have been protesting at incarceration and detention facilities around the state of New Mexico for, I believe, the past 2 months, every single Friday. This coming Friday is no exception. This Friday is going to be a little bit special. They're doing a Free Them All Friday press conference calling for the governor of New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham, to release people from New Mexico jails, prisons, and detention centers now. And this action this coming Friday is part of a national week of action against youth incarceration. So this coming Friday, May 22nd, tomorrow, at 2:30 p.m. in Albuquerque at 5100 2nd Street Northwest, Albuquerque, there's going to be another car protest calling for the governor to do the right thing. To refuse, they're saying, we are not going to let you folks let the people die in these facilities. Instead, you have to take care of them. And if you can't take care of them, you got to let them out, period. So if you're interested in supporting that super important work and you want to do so in a COVID-19 safe way, they are having an in-person car protest tomorrow at 2:30, and they're meeting at the Albuquerque Juvenile Detention Center. If you're going to go, cover your car with signs of support, calling for the governor free them all, and show up. So once again, that address is, hold on, I just lost it. I was looking at the post. Blah, 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 blah. That's giving me an opportunity to stop talking, if I can gather myself. Anyway, so yeah, 5100 2nd Street Northwest, Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is the Albuquerque Youth Detention Center. Show up tomorrow at 2:30 and let the governor know we are not going to stay silent while you fail these people who are locked up. We demand that you let them out because you're not taking care of them anyway. So please do that. Also, okay. I moved the script and then lost it for a second, but it's right there. Okay. Also, as usual, if you are a person who needs support, who needs, help getting groceries or supplies, Albuquerque Mutual Aid has been delivering supplies to thousands of families, thousands of people in the city of Albuquerque for 2 months now. So if you need a care package, if you need support, or if you want to support this grassroots work, because once again, like I said, the folks that are filling in the gap right now don't have grant funding, are not nonprofits, do not have foundation money. Like, they are literally paying out of pocket and running on donations in order to do this work, and so they need your support. So if you want a care package or you want to donate to support Albuquerque Mutual Aid, go to ffol.org/mutual aid, and on that page you will find a form to request a care package of food and supplies, or ways that you can donate to support that grassroots work. Shout out to Albuquerque Mutual Aid. Also, John Brown Breakfast Clubs, our comrades in the John Brown Breakfast Club are always every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. at the intersection of 1st and Silver, doing a giveaway of really tasty breakfast burritos to food insecure and houseless folks in Albuquerque. So if you are within those categories, or you know someone within those categories, encourage them to go down to the corner of 1st and Silver at 9 a.m. every single Saturday for a care package that contains a hot meal. And shout out to John Brown Breakfast Club. They've been doing that work for a couple of years. They serve hundreds of people every week, and it's a really dope project. And once again, before I wrap up this segment, I just want to encourage you, if you're an African person watching me speak right now and you're in New Mexico, please reach out to the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter. We need your help to do this work. We have big plans for institutions to build in the African community to take care of our people, so people can take care of themselves. In order to realize those plans, we need more people. We need your brilliance, we need your labor, we need you. So please reach out to us. Information is on the screen. Lastly, as I mentioned, African Liberation Day is streaming worldwide this coming Monday, May 25th. As a matter of fact, let me cover my face again with the information. Blah. So please, if you are free on Monday, May 25th, which if you're in the United States, it's Memorial Day, so you probably don't have to work. So if you're free on Monday, May 25th, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, 10:30 a.m. Central Time, 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Time, please tune in to the free web broadcast of African Liberation Day 2020. You're going to see speakers from all over the African world. You're going to see solidarity statements from all sorts of revolutionary African organizations and revolutionary anti-colonial organizations that rock with APIP. You're going to see me talking for a long time. You're going to see APIP cadre from all over the world educating y'all. It's going to be a really dynamic and beautiful event. And please, we encourage you to tune in. It's absolutely free. It's completely free. So yeah, tune in to African Liberation Day 2020, the free web broadcast, Monday, May 25th. Times in your time zone are there. If your time zone not listed, you better Google that shit. I'm sure you can. Like, for example, if you're like in a time zone that's not listed, you can just Google what is 8:30 Pacific time in my time zone, and Google will tell you. So there's no excuse. You can find out. So please join us. And if you want more information about African Liberation Day and about the program on Monday, visit AfricanLiberationDay.net. It's at the bottom of the screen. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but in the bottom of the yellow box, you can see the URL. Once again, that's AfricanLiberationDay.net, and I'll also put this in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. Also, let me show me. There we go. Hi. Also, like I said, we do this show 11 a.m. Mountain Time every single week. Next Thursday, which I have it as the 21st, but it's not the 21st because today's the 21st. Let me see what date that is. It's the 28th. So next Thursday, May 28th, we're going to do the show again at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, and the topic we're going to be covering is rent strikes and eviction defense. Because clearly, these rich people in power have no concept of what it's like to not be able to work and not pay your rent and still be being charged rent. And so the masses of African people, the masses of colonized working class people have to take the matter into our own hands and organize to build power and defend ourselves from these greedy landlords and from these failing people in leadership in order to protect our communities, in order to stay housed. So next Thursday on the show, we're going to be talking about rent strikes, the history of rent strikes within the African liberation movement. We're going to be talking about eviction defense, and I believe we're going to have a very special guest discussing that topic who has some hands-on experience, because I would very much like to not be on the show next week. So, yeah, if you want to tune in and learn a lot about how you can organize a rent strike and how you can organize eviction defense to fight back against your greedy landlord, tune in next Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. Also, the APIP, like I said, is a global organization. We're everywhere. And so we are not the only chapter here in New Mexico that's doing these online political education programs. Our comrade in California chapter, Ajamu Umi, does a weekly show every single Sunday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, where he covers a political education topic with his cool daughter, Shakura, in depth for an hour. So this coming Sunday is no exception. He's going to be talking about African Liberation Day and why it's the best thing ever and why you should tune in on Monday. And so if you want to learn more about ALD, if I piqued your interest today on the show, please tune in to facebook.com/AjamuUmi at 5 p.m. Pacific Time, 4 p.m. Mountain Time for a 1-hour program about why you should care about ALD, about African Liberation Day. And I put Ajamu's profile in the comments. Facebook.com/AjamuUmi, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. Pacific on Sunday. Alrighty. Whew, I just need to take a break. It's like a lot of talking. Okay. I have 8 minutes until I have to go to work. Alright. So, this is the closing of the show. Once again, my name is Onya Sanu. I am an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party New Mexico chapter and the All African Women's Revolutionary Union. This has been Weekly Pan-African News Live, news program presented by the APIP New Mexico to provide y'all with updates and political education from a revolutionary African perspective. We do this every single Thursday at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, so please tune in weekly. And once again, we are the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We are a revolutionary Pan-African socialist mass, not vanguard, but mass political party based in Africa with the political objective of Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, because we believe when Africa is free, our people everywhere in the world will be free, and we deserve to be free. So once again, thank you for joining us. I'm Monia Sanmu, and I am ready for revolution, and I hope you are too. And also, join the organization. Thank you. Have a good day.